Hello everyone, welcome here. We are here today with, it's Valeria Robecco and I'm the UNCA president. We're very grateful to have here today Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem to hear from the Israeli human rights organization about their work in Gaza and the last developments on the ground. So I don't want to take any more of your time, and I leave the floor to Lou Charbonneau, UN Director of Human Rights Watch. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Valeria, and it's great to see everyone. Yes, I'm Lou Charbonneau, Human Rights Watch, UN Director. Great to see everyone here, and I know it's a busy time, but let me introduce our guests who are from fantastic organization B'Tselem. And we have here Yuli Novak, who is the executive director of B'Tselem, and Kareem Jubran, who's the field research director. And they are here to talk about their report that was published in July called Our Genocide. And they've just come back from Washington, D.C. They're doing a kind of U.S. tour, D.C. and New York. Without further ado, over to you both.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming. I'll say a few words about B'Tselem, and then we'll dive into the current situation we're in and the report we published. So B'Tselem is one of the oldest Israeli human rights organizations. We work for over 35 years to document, investigate, and publish information about violation of human rights of Palestinians under Israeli occupation and apartheid. We are Israeli organization, but our staff is combined of Israelis and Palestinians who work together. The Israeli Jews, Palestinians from within 48, from within Israel, from Jerusalem, like Kareem, you're with me, from the West Bank and from the Gaza Strip. So in that sense, we're quite unique creature in the place we're coming from, which is very much entrenched in polarization and separation between Jews and Palestinians. We're coming here in a very critical moment and dangerous moment in our view, because we're a system, a governing system that is in control over territory between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. The Israeli system, a system that committed genocide, is now enjoying full impunity by Western countries, by international community, and after this week also from bodies of the UN Security Council. We can talk about that later. We are now almost 6 weeks into the so-called ceasefire, and we can tell you that we can say a lot of things about this ceasefire. The fire didn't stop, not even for a minute. So even if the bombardment reduced, we're still witnessing an ongoing assault over Palestinians, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. We're sitting here today knowing that at least 32 Palestinians got killed by Israel yesterday in the Gaza Strip. 12 from them, 12 are children, 8 women, and again the numbers probably higher, but that's the official numbers that we know, that the bodies that arrived to hospitals in the Strip. Since October 10th, the announce of the deal, we're talking about more than 300 people who got killed in Gaza by Israel. We're talking about more than 1,500 buildings that were destroyed, and the medical aid, the humanitarian aid that was supposed to get in according to the agreement, which was 600 trucks a day, which is merely enough or sufficient to the needs, the humanitarian needs in the Gaza Strip. Anyway, this humanitarian aid does not enter the Strip. At least 75% of those trucks are denied access by Israel. So that's the situation on the ground in Gaza. At the same time, in the West Bank, violence is just keep rising. That's one thing that concerned us about this so-called ceasefire. The other thing is the conditions that enable us to get to where we are, that enable Israel to commit the most extreme form of violence that can be conducted against people, a genocide, are still in place and probably got even worse than where we were 2 years ago. And in that sense, with lack of impunity, complete impunity, complete lack of accountability, and a condition that are just worsening, we come here to the US to say that we fear that the worst, we haven't seen the worst, that the worst of this sort of violence that the Israeli system can inflict on Palestinians and on human beings is yet to be seen, if nothing will change. We're here to talk about genocide, and as was told, this July we published a report. We called the report Our Genocide because that's what it is, a genocide that was conducted and still is by the people of that land, over the people of that land. And since we are coming from there, we are both, Kareem and I, are Palestinian and Israeli who live there. We thought that's the right way to title this report. This report is personal because this violence is personal. It affects our lives, the place we live in, and the future that we hope for. When we're talking about genocide, we're talking about an coordinated and intended attack over civilian with the clear intention to destroy a group as such. In that sense, when we're talking about genocide, and that's what makes this phenomenon of political violence so extreme and so unique. The targets are the people, but the aim of the attack is the group and to destroy a group. It doesn't mean that this attack needs to kill each and every person within the group, right? What it means that the ultimate goal of it is to make the group disappear as such. That's what Israeli leaders declared at the beginning of the attack over Gaza back in October 23. They said that their intention and the attack is intended for towards civilians. Our leaders, political leaders, including the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, the President of Israel, all stood up and said there are no innocent people in Gaza. We are fighting human animals. It's quotes. Benjamin Netanyahu, when he sent the soldiers, the Israeli army, into Gaza, he told them, you are going to fight Amalek. Now, Amalek for Israel is a dog whistle. We all learned it in school, this biblical term that means go and kill everybody. Don't leave anyone behind, not women, no children. That was the declarations. And then they went on and did exactly what they promised. In our report, which you can read, we actually try to do two things. The first is to portray this specific genocide, because every genocide throughout history used different tactics, different methods in order to achieve its goal. When we're looking at what took place during the past 2 years and still is in Gaza, we're seeing actually the combination of 4 main tactics. One is the mass killing and physical and mental harm that has been inflicted on people. We're talking about more than 67,000 people dead that got killed. Third of them are women and children, probably much more that are still buried under the rubble of Gaza. So that's the first element. The second element is the mass deportation of people, the forced removal of millions of people. Almost all of Gaza population were forcibly displaced more than once, many times more than once within the enclave. The third component is the mass destruction, and that we all saw the aerial footage of entire cities. We actually talk about most of the Gaza Strip at the moment is in complete ruin. We're talking about more than 80% of the buildings in Gaza that have been destroyed. And the fourth element is the destruction of society as such, destruction of the institution of the family, of the community, the full destruction of the education system, right? And in that element is not only about now, it's also about destroying the future generation and the ability of this community to recover. So what Israel did is basically to make sure to destroy everything that is needed for humans and for society to live. And they succeeded in that. Above all these tactics, we can identify, and it's important to identify this thick layer of incitement and dehumanization that enable the Israeli public to fully support this attack, either by taking part of it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of soldiers who got recruited to reserve duty, volunteered to reserve duty in order to take part in the attack over Gaza. We're talking about the total legitimization and normalization of genocide and genocidal discourse within Israel public discourse and within Israeli media, or for other just standing by and turning a blind eye to what they see on the ground. So that's the first part of our report. The second part of our report is trying to explain how we got there. And here it is very important for us to stress a genocide is not an event, it's a process. No genocide throughout history started in one day out of thin air. And in that sense, October 7th attack over Israel was crucial in our understanding in pushing this system from a state of being a system, a governing system of oppression, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, into a genocidal system. But it couldn't happen without prior conditions that were set throughout almost 80 years now of Israeli control over the land, over the Palestinians, holding an oppressive regime of separation, of hyper-militarization, of constant incitement and dehumanization of Palestinians, specifically and especially the Palestinians of Gaza, and above all, impunity, ongoing impunity that Israelis and the Israeli system enjoyed throughout the decades for hurting Palestinians. We are focusing in our report on the condition and what happened in Gaza, but at the same time we're also saying and stressing that the situation is worrying not only in Gaza, because we're talking about the same regime, the same system that is in place, that is in control in Gaza, in the West Bank and inside Israel. The same army that conducted those crimes in Gaza is deployed in the West Bank, the same soldiers, the same commanders, the same mindset, and even if the level of violence that we're witnessing today in the West Bank is lower, the logic is the same, and we stress a very strong warning that genocide can spill over into other areas, as long as there is no mechanism, and today there is no mechanism either locally or internationally that will stop it and demand Israel to be held accountable for committing genocide. Kareem?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending, to having us. I worked for B'Tselem more than 21 years. I started my work at 2004 as a field researcher in Jerusalem. Later on, I became the head of the field research in B'Tselem. Along the year, we document and we received hundreds, if not thousands, of documentations of human rights violations, of crimes. At 2008, we thought that we have seen the most terrible year in our lives when Israel attacked Gaza and killed more than 1,400 Palestinians inside Gaza. But later on, 2014, again, Gaza being attacked and more than 2,400 Palestinians being killed, including whole families, which they wiped out completely. Later on, 2019, the March return demonstrations, Israeli sniper killed more than 230 Palestinians while they protesting next to the borders. The international community didn't do anything in order to stop this violence from Israel. They don't have any accountability against these crimes against the civilians inside Palestine and against the occupation and the apartheid regime, which is continuing for decades in our country. That's what allowing Israel to start its genocide in Gaza after the 7th of October. If we're talking about the disaster situation inside Gaza and the life of the people under the genocide in Gaza, it's completely disastrous. The numbers of the fatalities, which is more than 67,000, and we have much more people still under the rubble of the buildings. And only one example, our field researcher, her brother, his wife, his daughter, they're being killed in the beginning of the war, and still until this moment their bodies under the rubble of Jabalia refugee camp. The mass destruction of the infrastructure inside Gaza, the destruction of the houses, the universities, the clinics, the schools, it means that the Israeli side wants to erase Gaza completely and to not able Gaza to be a place for life in the future. They had the main goal to displace and to ethnic cleansing Gaza completely, and by creating unlivable conditions inside Gaza. When we talk with our friends in Gaza, I have a friend, Muhammad Saeed, he told me more than one time that I wish that I was being killed with my family in the beginning of the war. I'm not passing all this tragical situation, starvation, fears. Imagine kids of Gaza living for 2 years under the aircraft attacks, 24 hours, day after day. After they hear every bomb or every attack, they thought that they will be the next victims of this crazy situation. As Yuli told, even after the ceasefire, the situation continued to be the same in Gaza. Maybe the number of the fatalities is less, but still the death is dancing there. Still the starvation, still the lack of the elementary needs. Just a few days ago, when the rain fell in Gaza, the people found themselves in swimming pools in their tents. And imagine the most needed thing now to be entered to Gaza, the tents. Israel, until this moment, bringing tents into Gaza. That means that they keep the suffering of the civilians. They want to punish more and more and more the civilians, not only by killing, but only by creating unlivable situation inside Gaza. If we look to the other side, to the West Bank, in the West Bank, the same. Since the 7th of October, more than 1,000 Palestinians being killed inside the West Bank. Israel started to adopt Gaza model and to bring Gaza model to the West Bank by using aircrafts attacking the refugee camps in the north of the West Bank, Jenin and Tulkarem refugee camps. They displaced from these camps around 40,000 Palestinians. And after almost 1 year, they are still outside their houses. They are not being allowed to return back to their houses. Another very dangerous phenomenon, the weapon of fascist Israeli civilians with hundreds, thousands of machine guns, M16. These groups and these militias terrorized and attacking the Palestinians in daily basis. Every day we receive a number of attacks against the civilians in the West Bank. The main goal of these attacks is to ethnic cleansing more than 60% of the total amount of the West Bank. These attacks are backed by the army, by the state, by politicians. Even the killing of Palestinians by settlers, and we document more than 20 cases of Palestinians being killed by the fire of the settlers without any accountability, without any price paying for that. If we move inside the West Bank now, there is more than 1,000 checkpoints and road blocks and gates and checkpoints. And if you are a Palestinian and you want to go to your work or to your university, you have to spend hours in your way. And the only and the main general thing that the Palestinians do every day in the morning to look to their smartphones about the situation of the roads. In some roads it's closed, some roads there are the settlers there and attacking the cars. You have to take in your account all these things before you leave your house if you are a Palestinian. The harvest season this year, it was completely disaster for the farmers. More than 90% of the farmers, they didn't reach their lands. And those, the lucky ones, which they get coordination in order to reach their land, they've been attacked in the presence of the army in their fields, and they've been pushed out of their, kicked out of their lands. Most of the olive fields, when they reached their fields, they found that the settlers cut their trees and they damaged all the fields. The forest displacement, until this moment, we're talking about 45 communities which they're being displaced and pushed out of their lands by the settler violence and by the daily attacks carried out by the settlers against the Palestinians. That's the situation in the West Bank, and that's why we warn that the genocide can be transferred to the West Bank with any small trigger, or any trigger will be enough to open the gates of the hell also inside the West Bank. Thank you.
We just one tiny correction. Kareem said that we're talking about the arming of settlers and Israeli civilians by the state, which is a huge project that takes place now under the leadership of Itamar Ben-Gvir, our national security. But he said machine guns, and what they're disappearing is our guns, right? So not a machine gun yet. We haven't got there, but more than, we know for sure that more than 200,000 guns have been spread around to both settlers and Israeli and Israelis within Israel, civilians in order to, within this kind of built militias of civil protection, or however they call it, but they are now on the streets and they are using them.
Thanks, Yuli and Kareem. So now let's open it up to questions. And if you could introduce yourself and say which media you represent, be great. Rami.
Do we need to use a microphone?
We hear you well, so.
Thank you. It's Rami with Al Jazeera Arabic. Thank you for the press conference. My question is about the Israeli response, if any, the Israeli government's response to your report. How did they respond to it? Did they ignore it? And how is B'Tselem's work viewed in Israeli society? Just wondering how that's going for you guys, and is your work being impeded at all by the government? We saw that the government has kind of criminalized the work of several Palestinian human rights organizations, and even now they're under US sanctions as well. Do you fear that happening to you? Thanks.
It is very clearly that the Israeli government, as any other extremist, authoritarian and oppressive government around, is working hard to silence criticism of any kind, and especially silencing human rights organizations, and especially silencing Palestinians, and even more maybe Palestinians and Jews who works together, because it is really kind of tackling the essence of this political system, which is separation and polarization among us. So you said, right, they are already in full attack that is extremely successful, unfortunately, against our colleagues from Palestinian human rights organization, right? So some of them were declared as, and we're talking about organizations that are stand for values just as we do, right? For values of human rights, protecting human rights, holding or believing in international law and try to promote it. Some of them were already designated as terror organization either by Israel or by the United States. Others are suffering sanctions that are equal to death penalty for organizations, for NGOs, US sanctions that are very much, that are clearly being pushed by the Israeli government, right? Mostly around the issue of the ICC. So there we have this also another layer of connection of this extreme attack over international legal institutions that are supposed to protect humans. In that sense, their tactic is very clear, is to divide us, to intimidate, to silence. And yes, and us in B'Tselem, among other Israeli human rights organizations, are also under this crackdown, ongoing crackdown. There are few legislation on the way, some of them regarding our funding, others are more on the criminal level, to criminalize our work, again, especially in connection with international law and international legal institutions. We have very little, actually we have zero way to confront it internally. And that comes to the other part of your question. Within Israel, the attack on Gaza, that wasn't called, of course, genocide, because Israelis won't call it a genocide, but the attack on Gaza enjoyed full support from the entire Jewish political spectrum, right? From what consider left all the way to the extreme right. You see a full cooperation and support of the attack itself. And in that sense, what we are saying, the message that we come forth with, which is a very simple one, it's just a message of humanity, of keeping the notion of human beings as something that need to be protected, is considered not only radical, but is completely out of the public and political discourse. The reaction to our report was, scarily enough, was a silence treatment. So while we are sitting here in front of you guys, and since July till now, we gave dozens of media interviews, and this report was covered worldwide. In Israel, it actually got zero, close to zero coverage, media coverage, but also public discussion. So the control the government has, their ability to control and to silence thing is so strong, and we're not talking only about the media, but also about social media and other outlets, like we know from other authoritarian spaces around the world. Above this, to mention one more thing, is the place of the Israeli media in normalizing and inciting for genocide, because sometimes I wish that people would understand Hebrew around the world, just for them to open for 5 minutes choose any mainstream TV outlet on 8 o'clock every day, the main watch the media journalist shows, and the genocidal discourse got to be completely internalized into Israel discourse, including inside Israel media. We'll give you one or two small examples. A discussion whether to starve people is legitimate or not is something that can be discussed on the evening news in Israel. A serious discussion whether this is a legitimate thing or not. On the day where the previous ceasefire was broke by Israel, it was March 18 this year. Israel broke the ceasefire that went on for about two months back then by an extensive bombardment of Gaza, which I don't know if you remember, but within less than 24 hours, more than 400 people got killed. The vast majority of them are women and children. On that evening, I opened Channel 12, the most watched news show in Israel at 8 o'clock. And what I saw on the screen was a message says, the beginning of the attack, 400 Hamas operatives got killed. Now, that's what normal people in Israel see when they open TV. That's what they hear. The notion that there are no innocent people in Gaza, that every civilian in Gaza, that every person in Gaza is a legitimate target, is kind of became normality. And in that sense, we are having a hard time. We're insisting on keep on doing our work as much as we can from within Israel-Palestine in order to document and to share this information, but it does become harder and much more riskier.
Thank you so much for bringing these comments here. My name is Mercedes Gallego with the Spanish newspaper El Correo. And I don't mean to be insensitive, but since the report already has been published, I will rather have you elaborating on what have happened since the so-called ceasefire and your opinion on the resolution that has been approved here at the UN, and how do you think that Board of Peace is gonna affect the situation in the region? Thank you.
So I began with that. To call it ceasefire is just wrong, because the fire continues, right? But what really scares us and seems to us super critical is the fact that we're facing a political system that conducted genocide and just allowed to go on with it. And in that sense, it's not only the problem of Palestinians and Israelis. It is, because we know that the violence can burst in the highest level, and even more at any moment, because nothing changed. But we believe it's the business of every human around the world, because normalizing genocide is something that put all of us in risk. If one government is allowed to do that, others will be able to as well. And in that sense, this week, the decision of the UN Security Council is not only disappointing, is also worrying in our view. It actually adopts this notion that we can look over international law, we can look over basic moral norms and just move on in this kind of a business-like deal without demanding the perpetrators to be held accountable. The other thing is that it completely overlook and go kind of above the heads of the victims, which is unacceptable in our views. The people in Gaza are not being asked, they're not being talked to. The Palestinians are not a factor in this. It's the deal between kind of forces from above. And maybe the worst thing is that this plan is kind of pointing us all not for a better future of real correction of the wrongs that we are facing, which is an oppressive regime, illegitimate regime, and genocidal regime that uses force and violence in order to control and to oppress people under its control, but replacing it with a different sort of occupation, with a different sort of a oppressive system that might be called that or another, but that is unacceptable from our side. The fact that the UN, a body of the UN that is supposed to protect humans, is taking part and kind of joining this path is, in our view, very, very alarming.
Do you have any figure of how many people have been killed since the so-called ceasefire?
We know that more than 300, among them children.
More than 120 kids, more than 50 women. And the number is raising up every day.
Probably while we're sitting here. Yeah.
Hi there, Frank Usiardo from TRT World. I have a question for both of you. With regards to this Board of Peace and the U.S. participation, would you agree that the U.S. would become part of the occupation directly and also be directly responsible for genocide? And the other question basically is the implementation of all of this. That's raised a lot of questions. And for you, sir, you were talking about the settlers. Do you believe the settlers should be held responsible directly for genocide?
So first of all, we do believe and say and wrote it that governments that supported and took part in and enabled Israel to move on are complicit to this horror, and even before, throughout the past 2 years. That's the first. We have no doubt that the U.S. government, the U.S. administration, and I'm not only talking about the current administration, but also the previous, the Biden administration, could have stopped the genocide, could have prevented the genocide if they wanted to. Without the support of the US and other countries, Israel wouldn't be able to do that. And that's not the first time in history that, you know, the international community is watching a genocide taking place and stand by and doing this political game while people are getting killed while society is getting completely broke apart. So yes, in that sense, we find it at least have responsibility for this ongoing violence. And the other thing about the settlers?
About the settlers, we can, of course, they hold legal responsibility about the crimes which they done every day for the Palestinians, but I think, and we think, that the state hold the biggest responsibility. It's occupied territories. The settlements project enterprise, it's illegal completely. The Palestinians is under all the conventions and under the international law. They are supposed to be protected population. the state doesn't protect them, and the opposite. The state supports the settler violence by not holding accountability and by supporting them directly, by giving them the weapons, giving them even the baggage which they use in their attacks against the Palestinians, standing behind without doing anything, preventing Palestinians even to push the danger from their own houses. And we have many cases that the Palestinians tried to protect their house from being burned. The army came and arrested the Palestinians. And in many cases, the army came and killed the Palestinians while they're protecting their houses from the settlers' attacks. So everybody is responsible for these attacks. Everybody should pay price for these attacks and for these crimes. The state itself and the settlers, as individuals, they should pay the price.
Maybe just to say a word, Palestinians today, both in Gaza and in the West Bank, and to some extent also inside Israel, are completely exposed to violence. There is no way for a Palestinian to protect him or herself these days. And if they try, they might only get themselves into more danger than they were. And this is, you know, even if a genocide doesn't take place right now in the West Bank, this logic of getting people to be completely exposed with no protection at all, this is a genocidal logic that we see all around everywhere in the territory under Israel control.
Evelyn, and then back there.
Thank you, Lou. Evelyn Leopold, Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists. October 7th, was that a game changer or didn't it matter? And secondly, I have a subscription to Haaretz. What do you think of that? Yeah.
Of Haaretz? What do you think of Haaretz?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, is that something you recommend or not?
To recommend to have a subscription. Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this promotion, but yes. No, I'll say the only media outlet, like not I would say like mainstream media outlet. I don't know how to call it because we have all kind of online smaller. But the only newspaper in Israel, the only media outlet in Israel that cover these crimes and cover the genocide to some extent is Haaretz. It's still being read by a small portion of society. I'll say something about October 7th. October 7th was a horrific criminal attack that was directed mostly towards civilians. It resulted in the killing of more than 1,200 people. The vast majority of them are civilians, kidnapping 250 people into the Gaza enclave. Personally, for me and for any Israeli I know, it was the most scary and traumatizing day of my life, of our life. And in that sense, we think that in order to understand the genocide, the Israeli genocide on Gaza, we have also to understand what October 7th did to the Israeli society. And I want to stress, I'm saying it not as a way to legitimize the violence that came after that. But if we look throughout history, most genocides had some kind of triggering event that usually was also a violent event. That kind of pushed the system, again, under circumstances that allowed it, right? The background and how we got to October 23 is important because without the enabling condition, it wouldn't happen. But October 7 had a huge effect on Israeli society. Part of the tragic thing about it is that, in our view, that instead of taking October 7 and understand it as a political failure, understand that this political system cannot go on because it is unsustainable to hold a system of oppression over millions of people for decades without the violence to be spilled over. Instead of that, if you ask the vast majority of Jewish Israelis what was October 7 about, they will say it was a military failure, an attack that basically came out of nowhere. We left Gaza, we withdrew from Gaza in 2005. Since then, they chose Hamas. Hamas was operating there, and then they came, right? So it came out of nowhere with no context, and it was a military failure. And we find it very tragic for Israelis not only not to use this opportunity to rethink about how we live and how this system works and how much it is not only unfair but also unsustainable and damaging for everyone. But actually what it was, it instilled such trauma and fear and anxiety into Israel that was completely exploited, even cynically, by our most extreme right-wing government. Within, we have people, high ministers, who for them, and some of them told it very clearly, all this, October 7th attack was an opportunity. One of them called it a time of miracle to fulfill an agenda that they held way before, a messianic agenda, an agenda of ethnic cleansing, of resettling the entire land by a racist agenda, right? Resettle the land by Jews. And the Israeli government actually, the way we see it, exploit this collective trauma in order to push forward a policy of genocide. And since October 7, 2023, until today, Israel is using October 7 as the ultimate justification for any action and any sort of violence that it takes place. And in that sense, I only say, it's also not unique to Israel, because any genocide throughout history was described while doing it as an act of self-defense in the face of some kind of existential threat, right? So history does repeat itself also in our homeland.
Hello. First, thank you for Europe. I assume that you look like one hand clapping there as a human rights organization. But what's your message to the leaders of the powerful countries in the world, just having a look at this genocide and they are not acting? While at Mariupol, 200 people or 260, they got killed. They want all of them visit there, and they consider it as a genocide until today. I'm not disregarding any human being life, but thousands, hundreds of thousands of people killed over there, over Gaza, okay? And besides the settlers, besides what it is happening, what's your message to them?
Sorry, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Zina. I'm working for I Am and Free and Homeland News.
Our message is that they should be ashamed, that history will judge them. Really, that's it. And something that, you know, we keep calling the international community and international leaders to do their role, but to be sincere, we're not counting on them. We're counting on the people. We're counting on hundreds of thousands of people who, you don't need to be a lawyer, just need to have eyes and heart and common sense and saw what takes place in Gaza and took the streets. Here in the US, in Europe, in other places, all around the world, right? And our hope is that people will keep doing that and not buy into this current kind of ceasefire, whatever we're in now, because that's what's scary us. We saw also countries are really a real regression in the pressure and the little pressure and the little criticism that was there is being taken back. Just a few days ago we heard from, we talked about the UN Security Council, but a few days ago we heard from the German government that they are withdraw their kind of block of stop they withdraw their block of arms to Israel. So everything is good now, we can go back business as usual. And this is just one example, right? So we are very worried about the current situation, and we count on the people just human beings, to keep see the truth and not to buy into this political game.
Hi, Adla Masood from The National. Follow up to what you're just saying. Why do you think the international community, these governments, are too scared to stand up to Israel?
You know, we are in a troubling moment globally, right? I mean, we're here in the US where terrible things are happening on the streets. And we see people are, I mean, this authoritarian trend, which show itself in different ways in different countries. For us, it's very clear, the connections between the things are very clear. And this common attack over some, not only the rule of law, but also basic norms that were always always kind of being fought about, but that are being diminished around the globe. In that sense, I think we're facing, and I'm saying we, again, we, the people of the world, are facing now a very cynical geopolitical scene that undermines values like human rights, like democracy, basic rights like the right of living, of dignity, and in that sense, and working according to interests that have nothing to do with the people. And in that sense, that is a moment where we need to get together, right, and rethink how we move forward. We're still trying to advocate and to push governments to move, but our belief is that they will move beyond their very narrow political interests once the people, their constituencies, will demand that from them. I don't know why. I mean, I have different answers for that, but I think we are, in order to understand why the world treated Israel the way it is, we also have to understand these global trends that we are facing.
Hi, Jessica from France 24. I just wonder, in light of global circumstances, what is it that gives you hope? Have you managed to change the minds of any Israelis with your work? Where do you see hope and a way forward?
It's very hard to get hope in these terrible times, but honestly, what giving me a hope that we standing together and we fight together. What giving me hope that I watch, it's very few, but there is a young Israeli, young people, even one of them work with us in B'Tselem, that every day and every night they sleep with the Bedouin community in order to protect these communities. And many of them being attacked very hardly by the settlers. That's what giving me hope, that we will continue together our struggle. Yes, it's very difficult. Yes, it's very painful, but I think we can do it with the support of you and the international community. We don't believe and we don't trust the political leaders because they are in cooperation, full cooperation as a leaders. But the people of the world, they give us also a lesson that we are not alone. We have thousands, hundreds, millions standing with us, millions of people supporting us, and we'll continue to do our work and our job, and we'll continue get hope that our grandsons and our will be in and will live in better situation and better atmosphere.
Last question.
Mona Autul with Al Quds Al Arabi Journal. Thank you very much for the briefing. Inside the Israeli society, is B'Tselem implementing or doing any tangible educational or outreach to counter disinformation, normalization, and the dehumanizing of Palestinians? I'm wondering if there are any efforts to help people understand the historical context and see Palestinians with more empathy and compassion. Thank you very much.
So yes, we are working within Israel. I have to admit that our potential audience within Israeli society is small, right? We're not talking about, it's not the masses. And to be sincere, again, looking back to history, no people that committed genocide throughout history realized in real time the meaning of what they were doing. They knew the practices, but the meaning usually takes a lot of time, and there are many psychological reasons for that. And history and the way we were brought up and the atmosphere and the mental situation that we grew up on has a huge impact on that. Having said that, we do believe that it is important, and it goes also to the question about hope, that, you know, within these extreme situations, also small groups have a huge importance, not only in order to change reality, but also for the day after. Because there will be a day, and we're sure of that. I mean, those kind of regime falls at one point. They are unsustainable for the long run. It might take years. We really hope that we'll get there with as less blood that will be spilled. But one day, we're gonna succeed. And in that day, there are gonna be millions of people, both Israelis and Palestinians, who will have to reconcile and reckon with what have been happening and understand it and find a way to live in a just and fair and free space. So in that sense, you know, it's small, but it is growing. The amount of Israelis that are able to see, and once they want, once they cross this barrier, they really want to understand. And then that's where we're coming in, and we wrote this report for the international community, but this report was first and foremost written in Hebrew. Then it was translated into English. And there is a reason for that, because Israelis should know, and if they want to, we want to be there to give them the opportunity to understand a very harsh truth about themselves, about their community, about the way they were brought up. But also, I find it hopeful, because understanding these truths also give us kind of opening for a different future.
Thank you, Yuli and Kareem, and all of you, and
Thank you.
UN Correspondents Association for having us, and yeah, have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.